We're moving on to something of huge concern in Tamil Nadu. In fact, it really should be huge concern across India. The oil spill in Chennai that originated from the refinery of the Chennai Petroleum Corporation has now crossed at least 20 square kilometers into the sea. A week after the oil spill, the damage to Chennai's eco-sensitive Ennore Creek is only getting worse. Oil is floating all over the river. Kosasta layar, tar balls and thick layers of oil are seen in several pockets across the coastline. Just how bad is it? I just want to play out this footage full screen before I go across to my panelists. Let's just have this footage right now. This happened, the leak, when the impact of the cyclone was being felt in Tamil Nadu and in the city of Chennai as well. These are the areas where, as you can see, fishermen have been deployed to actually skim the surface of the sea in this estuary region of the oil that you can see so clearly on your screens, to lift it up and try and get it out. When in fact the skimmers, other more elaborate machinery, including machinery which sucks out oil and has the ability of, to a large extent, being able to contain an oil spill, has not been deployed in the numbers or in the extent that it needs to. So you've got fishermen over there doing this job. Now, it's a large area which has been affected. Let's see if we can play out some other footage as well of this area. But let me introduce my panelists, Dr. Jayashree Venkatesan, Managing Trustee of Care Earth, and Arun Krishnamurthy, the founder of EFI. Thank you very much for joining us. Arun Krishnamurthy, what has the impact been on that estuary region of Ennore?
We're talking about an industrial belt which is almost with island characteristics and estuary, as rightly mentioned, freshwater, aquatic, marine, and all kinds of life affected because of this industrial contamination. This is industrially dynamic zone. For people who don't know Chennai, north of Chennai, we're talking about heavy port activity, a large fishing harbor. Not just that, we're talking about industrial manufacturing, oil refineries, coal, and a lot of other items which are environmentally hazardous in a small zone. And these are environmental disasters waiting to happen. And this is not the first time we've had such an oil spill, right? And to witness this kind of an oil spill in one such an eco-sensitive zone, especially given that we are in our sea turtle nesting season is about to start. At one such definitely livelihoods, fisherfolk livelihood, and many of that is the key focus, given that ecologically speaking, the wildlife aspect of the impact that this is going to have is scary, is worrying, given that we have more and more systems forming in the open ocean with high tides and more. Humanly cleaning this may not be possible. Even if it's claimed that it is to be clean, I don't see that it's going to happen so.
Okay. Dr. Jayashree Venkatesan, what is your reading of the particular situation in terms of the harm which has already been caused, for example, to marine life? We've seen pictures of fish which have been impacted in the area. There are fisher folk over here who work, their boats, the areas where they operate, and this has apparently gone to approximately, what, 20 square kilometers?
Nothing surprising about it. This is an area that's been subject to repeat environmental issues. This is not the first time something like this is happening. It's an extremely vulnerable area, at the same time extremely charismatic in terms of its ecology, in terms of its diversity. The thing that actually triggers this whole thing into a catastrophe or a disaster is the fact that this is a huge wetland complex, very shallow, very flat, and things can spread out in no time, and there's absolutely no means by which we can control it. Secondly, and far more important, is the fact, while the immediate impact of it is visible by way of dead fish and other kinds of organisms, the long-term impact is something that nobody has recognized till now. Oil has a tendency to accumulate in places, and there are enough nooks and crevices here in terms of farms, mud flats, mangroves, and all that. What kind of impact it would have on a long-term basis is something that we can only speculate at this point of time. There's no categoric answer to this question as to what would be the impact. It is suffice to say that the impact is going to be huge, long-term, but we have no idea as to how intense or how much the impact is going to be. We can only speculate.
This is actually fairly strong footage. Let's have this up full screen if we can for a moment, because, you can see these workers standing in the oil. This is from the early days when it actually took place. in the residential areas in Chennai, which also flooded partly with this oil. You can see the muck which got into their home, seawater, fresh water, all of it mixing with this oil, which actually leaked out. Arun, as we see this footage, Arun Krishnamurthy, where is the accountability? Is that the big concern? Is there anybody who's going to be sent to jail? Is there anybody, any institution, any industry which is going to be shut down, or is it just back to usual?
No industry can be shut down given the fact that these industries in this belt cater to as many livelihoods as we speak in terms of fisher folk and others who are also residing in this belt. And Chennai's economy, a part of India's economy, depends on this tiny belt. This is industrialization with rare minimum, very few aspects of conservation practices that could be taken into account for, which is happening across the country. And Chennai is a fine example as to how we should not carry forward our developmental plan with no idea, just looking at dry days. We go around building and we have no safety precautions. We don't have any kind of vulnerability reports that could support us in combating such untoward incidences. There is definitely going to be no accountability, right? This is going to be in the news for a few days, and after which this is going to be forgotten. We've had many oil spills in this very belt even in the past. Whatever happened during those oil spills, there will be judiciary that will take note of this and initiate some action. There will be some industrial output which would come in terms of remedy that would be put out, a few labor, a few photo opportunities. Unfortunately, as rightly pointed by a fellow panelist, the impact of this on health, on ecology, on economy is going to be huge, and it's going to be long term. And nobody is to be held accountable in the short term period, because we've seen this time in and again. We've seen this.
Let's just bring up a map of the area. I'm not familiar with the area. Dr. Venkateshan, perhaps you can help me out. But, there's the CPCL facility where the leak took place. The water, as I understand, the oil, as I understand it, mixed with water of the Buckingham Canal. It went northwards towards Ennore, and in that estuarine area, it leaked out and it polluted a river as well. Is that right? So it's not just the estuary or the area where the sea merges with the land, it's also a river which has been polluted, and the canal too.
Yes, that's how it normally is. This is a typical pattern in terms of spread of pollutants, and the pollutants, the other pollutants that have been in this area for a very long time, fly ash and other things, also follow the same pattern. If something happens in Ennore, which by the way is the most vulnerable patch along the Coromandel coast, then this is something that's been proven by research. Something happens here, it spreads both inland as well as towards the sea. And that is the biggest problem in terms of not only understanding the impact, but also taking up remedial action.
Arun Krishnamurthy, a final question to you. Do we know what exactly happened? It's obviously something which came out of CPCL. Was it a tank which leaked? Was this an overflow tank which was kept, which sort of mixed with seawater, rainwater when the flooding took place? What exactly happened?
I can speak for the region and what could have happened. I don't have proof of actual data of what actually happened, but we assume, simply because we know this belt, we've restored 2 lakes in this belt, again with local industry. So we kind of know what could have happened. It's as simple as this. There are marsh characteristics. There's a riverine ecology on one side. And as rightly pointed through that map, there is a flow dynamics to this region. And this is also the downstream to a large watershed, which means there's going to be flow from upstream. When that pressure builds on this tiny belt, all the stored contaminants at one point, especially given that we had 19 centimeters rainfall in one evening and almost 30 plus centimeter rainfall the next 2 days, which meant that kind of flow and the heavy intensity rainfall would have caused some kind of a breach and a leakage, which could have led to this kind of a dissemination into the channel. And thereafter, to this extent, when we visited this belt, right, the images that you're seeing from the household, there's almost 5 feet worth flood stagnation. And flood stagnation across Chennai is very different from this, simply because everywhere else is rainwater with the sewage or muck that you're seeing. Here, you actually had a 1.5 feet skim layer of just oil and hydrocarbons in that water, right? And it became a sludge with slippery characteristics. And that's what we see also happening on the coast now. That's exactly why we feel cleaning this manually with whatever be the techniques and technology we claim, to the extent that it has spread is not possible. And for this quantum to have been released, it would not have been possible but for a breach of a mega kind and type.
This is just so horrific. It is just terrible. Yeah. Well, I mean, what does one say? Thank you so much for informing and keeping our viewers alive to something like this. And it is an issue, along with all other environmental issues, that we'll try, even on prime time when people like to shout more, to keep alive. Thank you very much.